Welcome to this episode of the John Henry Weston Show, where I'm very pleased to have a guest with me who many of you know as the founder and editor of Catholic World News. Phil Lawler has written a book called Contagious Faith, in which he discusses many things that we're going to talk about on the show. But one of the things he talks about is the health first heresy, which of course pertains to what we've been going through on COVID. You're going to want to stick around for this one. Phil Lawler, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. It's good to see you after having corresponded online a bit.
Absolutely. Let's begin as we always do with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Phil Lawler, I have known you for many, many years. In fact, years longer than we've been in communication, because Catholic World News was really one of the things that inspired LifeSite to found as well. Way back in 95, I was looking, because you guys just started, and I said, gee, we could do that for the pro-life movement too. So we actually started an email kind of news thing that went on for a couple of years there before LifeSite News proper founded. It was an amazing thing. I'd always been impressed by your rigorous pursuit of truth and the fact that Catholic news was necessary because the bias against the truth and the faith were just so extreme. Tell us, for our listeners who don't know you as well, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, let me just jump off from that. I was editing Catholic World Report, the monthly magazine at the time in the mid-90s. And I have for years been concerned that Catholics are not getting the news that they need. And part of the problem is the bias that you see in the mainstream media. But bias, you can discount for bias if you know what the facts are. You know the New York Times has its own editorial slant. So any story that's in the New York Times, you can sort of adjust for parallax and get reality. But if the story isn't in the Times, if you never hear it at all, there's no way to adjust. And that's the case with all too many issues, particularly the pro-life issues. You just don't hear about them in the mainstream media because mainstream media, the editors don't consider them important. And so you really need your own source of news, a source that will view the world as you see it and see things as important that you think are important. And so that's why I wanted to be in the news business. As I said, I was working in Catholic World Report, and it's a monthly magazine, and I was developing contacts all over the world. And I thought, I have a problem, because if I find a useful contact in, say, Croatia, we're only going to do a story about Croatia maybe once every year or less than that, and I'll lose touch with him. Whereas if I could ask him to do just a little bit of a report much more frequently, I'd have him online. And with the development of the World Wide Web, I could do that. And so I also started out as an email news service. And when the web blossomed, then I put it online and have been going ever since.
Amazing. So in your new book, you address many things about the faith, but if we could just start with this thing you called the health first heresy. I think most people will be very, very interested in that. We are all living through an unbelievable insanity. There's so much, I think, from a news hound or a reporter's perspective, particularly the discrepancies. Even if everything is accepted as gospel truth about COVID, the reality of it, it's all innocently come from somewhere, and we're doing the best we can to treat it with the governments or all with everyone's best interests in heart, including the vaccines. Even if that were all true, the discrepancy, the absolute inequality between how we are allowed to go to church and yet how you're allowed to fly in a plane, or how you're allowed to go to the beer or liquor store. There's an absolute injustice going on there. Tell us from, what's in your book about the Health First heresy?
Well, I can approach that by telling you how I decided to write the book, which was really the genesis was very soon after the lockdown here, when we could not go to Mass, or at least we couldn't go to Mass publicly and officially. And a lot of us found ways, but it was wrong. It was terribly wrong. And I couldn't believe it was happening in my lifetime. I mean, I've grown up in the faith, and I've heard, of course, about places and times where it's been illegal to practice the Catholic faith, and brave Catholics have practiced the faith anyway, sometimes going to jail, sometimes it's cost them their lives. But here we had a disease, which by the worst accounts was a very minor threat. And we were closing down churches. I found it really hard to fathom how we could accept this, how bishops could do this. I mean, the first obligation of a bishop is to make sure that his people have access to the sacraments, and we didn't. And it was voluntary. It was a self-inflicted wound. When you speak of the Health First heresy, the heresy that I'm referring to there is the idea that your physical health is more important than your spiritual health. It isn't. I mean, you take risks all the time. You take a risk every time you get in a car. You take a risk every time you go down a flight of stairs. If you're a sane person, you calculate the risks and rewards, and you take intelligent risks, but you do take risks. Now, are you willing to take a little bit of a risk to participate in the sacrifice of the Mass, which is the source and summit of our faith? And what is this risk that you're undertaking? It's a very small risk of contracting a disease which probably will not be terribly serious for you unless you are already seriously ill. So it seemed to me such a horrendously disproportionate reaction. And not just disproportionate, but betrayed a lack of faith. Because if you really believed that this is the most important thing you do all day, all week, is get to Mass, you would get to Mass. I mean, as you say, you could go out and buy a 6-pack of beer. Why was that essential? And the Mass was not. How did we tolerate this? So that's what got me pounding my keyboard this year.
One of the responses, though, to that right away is that, but you have access. You have access to the medium you've chosen for your whole profession. Online access to the Mass. What's wrong with that? How do you respond?
There again, it's an attitude born of a lack of faith. If you believe that participation in the Mass is essential, not watching online, not being an observer, not being a consumer, but actually participating. You know, we just come through the synod for the Amazon region, where many bishops were saying it's absolutely essential we have to get married men as priests because it's absolutely essential that these people have access to the Mass. And then just a few months later, some of the same people saying, well, you don't have access to the Mass, but you can watch on TV, or you can watch it live streaming. And it's just not the same experience. If what you think about the Mass is that you can watch it on TV and that's just as good, then there's something missing in your faith. It's a sort of magical, or I'm not sure how to characterize that line of thought because it's so foreign to me, but it's not the Catholic faith.
Yeah. One of the ways of characterizing it has been that I've heard has been to say, well, that you believe then maybe in virtual marriage as well in relations with your spouse. So it's not all that fruitful. Amazing. One of the things that you have experienced that is really unique, and I know your former book was about this, it's to see the dark underbelly of the church, the dark side of things, the real Judas priests who have it's just done unspeakable things in terms of the sexual abuse crisis. But you've dealt not only in the sexual abuse crisis, but the crisis in terms of the infidelity of pastors, even bishops, to very high-ranking people in the church, really undermining the faith. And yet your faith has remained strong. and you continue to fight in this arena despite all the darkness around it. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, two things. First, I'm Irish, so, I like a fight. And I'm such an ornery creature. I'm just not going to let people get away with it. I mean, to put it more seriously, it's my faith. It's our faith. I'm not going to allow people to take it away from me. And we shouldn't. And we should be prepared to fight for it. And fighting intellectually for it doesn't require nearly the amount of courage as so many of the martyrs have already shown. But I also have to tell you that this lockdown, this past year, shook my faith much more than the sex abuse scandal, even though I was up to my eyeballs in reporting on that very early on. I was appalled by it. And I mean, there were days when I was virtually weeping at the end of a day of reporting because I read so much that was so horrific. And it was so scandalous to see that bishops were condoning this or enabling this sort of just terrible exploitative behavior of children. But I could always tell myself it was a minority of priests who did these horrible things. One was too many, but it was a small minority of priests. And I understood evil. I understand, sexual predators, that sort of evil is in the world. That wasn't a revelation to me. It was more appalling to me to see that it wasn't curbed as soon as it was found. Mm-hmm. But I knew there was evil. I always thought that whatever else went wrong, our bishops would make sure that we got the sacraments. That was the bedrock on which I built my everyday life. And then along came the day when I was told, you can't go to Mass. And that was, to me, more of a betrayal, because really, for most of the people, unless you knew somebody, you just couldn't get to Mass for weeks at a time. Yeah. And how can you have a Catholic Church that allows that to happen? It boggled my mind.
Truly unbelievable. We had the scenario where some pastors were fighting, some non-Catholic pastors, some Jewish Orthodox leaders were fighting. Actually, I know of a Catholic lawyer, Chris Ferrara, who was fighting on their behalf, along with some pastors who are usually considered ostracized from the Catholic Church in that they were SSPX priests. But they were the ones fighting, not, for the most part, not the mainstream Catholic leaders. So that's an unbelievable thing, and so strange to see where these people of different religions are fighting for their right to their worship when so many of the Catholic leaders were not fighting for it. It was incredible.
It was, and it was really a shame. I was embarrassed to see in Massachusetts, where I live, there was an evangelical pastor who was fighting for the right to worship. And I thought, well, God bless him, but where are our bishops? And as far as I know, there was the one bishop, Bishop DiMarzio in Brooklyn, who launched a lawsuit. It seems to me there should have been about 300 Catholic dioceses that launched lawsuits, because the Catholic Church is the biggest institution. It's the one that everybody looks to. It's the most organized. It has the most clout. And it should have been up there fighting all the time.
What, in your experience, and you have a vast experience in knowing the church, what have you seen that most points to the reason behind what's going, or the lack of what's gone on in terms of fighting for the faith, and the reason for the willing acceptance of the shutdown?
I'd say there are two different things. On the one hand, I think our bishops are scarred by their experience with the sex abuse scandal, and they're afraid of getting on the wrong side of the media on any issue at all. And the media has been going hammer and tongs for a year now, fear-mongering, the panic porn, as I call it. Every day a new headline about how likely it is that you'll die of COVID. And our bishops didn't want to be the bad guys and say, we're going to take risks that you are not willing to take. That's one issue. The other issue is a deeper issue and a more long-lasting issue. And I think one that I've addressed one way or another in my work on all of my work on the scandals. Are church leaders trying to act as community leaders rather than spiritual fathers, trying to be in sync with the political will of well, I suppose political correctness is one shorthand way to say it, but believing that their role as bishops or as pastors is to build a community, to make our lives better. It's really a form of the health first heresy, another form to make our lives on this earth better. And that's not what the church is about.
Absolutely. What do you propose, or if you propose, a solution to all this? Where are you at with what might be the best way forward for us? Catholics are struggling all over the world with the same thing. Most of them, again, being locked out of their churches. Some haven't been to Mass in a year and a half. And they're just, what are they supposed to do?
Well, you can be a Catholic under dire circumstances, even if you don't have pastoral help. The church somehow survived in Japan. The Catholic faith oddly survived despite complete absence of priests for generations. It's obviously not what we want. What most of us should be doing, I think, is taking a bolder stand for the faith and insisting that our pastors and our bishops do the same. Because this is the message that I try to get across. And the reason that I entitled the book Contagious Faith is that I believe that sort of faith is contagious. I believe that if we are bold enough and firm enough in our faith, clear enough in our faith, to say that this is our top priority, we're going to get to Mass no matter what, that other people start noticing it. Mm-hmm. And other people start saying, oh, that's really important to them. Why? Well, once they ask the question why, they're listening. And once they listen, you give them the faith. And the faith, when it's properly explained, always sells because it answers fundamental human needs. But first, you have to get people listening. And the way you get people listening is through witness, through showing what's important to you, through sounding different, through not being afraid to sound different, and to show that your priorities are not the same priorities that you're going to see on CNN every night.
Yes, and I think, your admonition to go out to the bishops to demand, for the faithful to demand their rights, which are the sacraments. This is the principal reason for the church is to bring us Christ, to bring us the sacraments. And so I think in doing that, you might also convert, if you will, the bishops themselves, because they are in dire need of conversion on this issue, because they've actually shut things down. They shut us out of the sacraments for the most part. One of the really difficult things with regard to doing that is people often feel, well, I can't even write properly, and they're going to think I'm nuts, and I can't do it successfully. What do you say to people who are concerned about doing it for a whole host of reasons? They don't feel that they're the right ones to speak up.
Find strength in numbers. If you don't think you're the right one to speak out, find a few other people who think the same way and join with them, and find someone who is more comfortable doing the talking or doing the writing, and get yourself an appointment with the bishop. I'm aware of now several dioceses in the U.S. where groups of men have spoken to the bishop in this way and just said, we cannot tolerate another shutdown. You must not shut things down again. And with a message with a little bit of force in it to say, if there is another shutdown, we'll do whatever we have to do, whatever is necessary to get the sacraments. What that means practically, well, I think it means that you are implicitly encouraging priests to do what they have to do as pastors to bring the sacraments to us. If that means doing it underground, let's do it. And, a fair number of priests did that in the past year. There were priests who were pushing the envelope, who were doing things that were either not encouraged, or in some cases even explicitly forbidden by their bishops, because they felt in conscience they were obligated to give the faithful the sacraments. That's what you're ordained for. And those priests, I think, should be recognized for their zeal. They shouldn't be perceived as the problem priests. Bishops should recognize them as, those are the priests you want to have, the ones who are out there with a zeal, showing a zeal for souls.
Showing a contagious faith. Absolutely. Phil, where can people get your book, and how can they get in touch with you?
Well, they can get in touch with me by looking at the Catholic Culture website, and I'm on there pretty much every weekday. And they can find the book. It's published by Sophia Institute Press, and you look on the Sophia Institute website, and of course you can get it in bookstores, you can get it on Amazon, but it's the same price direct from the publisher if you don't want to enrich Amazon.
Excellent. We'll have the links to that in my blog post on this and below this video as well. Phil Lawler, any parting thoughts before we let you go?
Keep up the good work. I think that your audience is disproportionately made up of people who have already made the commitment that I'm encouraging people to make. And I think I think it's contagious. I think you make the commitment, you refuse to compromise your faith, and you'll find that other people are drawn to you. And we know how this ends up. We don't know what we'll go through in the short term, but we do know how this ends in the last analysis. So have faith and confidence.
Amen. Phil Lawler, thank you for all that you do. You've been a great inspiration to me for decades and decades now.
Thank you for saying that. And thank you for having me on.
God bless you. And God bless all of you. We'll see you next time on the John Henry Weston Show. Hi, this is John Henry Weston, the co-founder and editor-in-chief of LifeSite News. I'm coming to you today because we want to be sure that we're communicating clearly with you, our loyal followers. Things are really heating up, as I'm sure you can see. Christians, conservative truth tellers are being targeted, are being banned from social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at an alarmingly fast rate. They are attempting to suppress any narrative that does not fit that of the mainstream media. We knew this day would come. We have been warning everyone who would listen and attempting to build up alternative platforms to continue to reach you. We have established ourselves on all sorts of platforms I'm going to explain in a minute, but the most important thing to do is come direct to lifesitenews.com, because there we will always be. But we've also established ourselves on platforms like Parler and MeWe, and our videos can be found on Rumble as well. We would love to see each of you on those platforms too, as they are not censoring or suppressing the truth that we are sharing every single day. More than these alternative social media platforms, we highly encourage you to subscribe to our email newsletter. We have really built up a large list of loyal readers on our email marketing platform, and we have prepared several backup plans for, well, I want to say if, but it's really when, we are removed from our current platform as well. Additionally, I really encourage you, as I said before, to make it a regular habit to go directly to lifesitenews.com. Make it your homepage. While all of these different platforms are an excellent way to curate your news, going directly to our website means that you will never encounter any censorship or sudden loss of LifeSite News reporting. Here's the thing. We will never stop sharing the truth. We founded this organization with the mission to be the life, family, and culture source for men and women who seek to know the truth. We have established a track record of honest reports, and this will never stop, even with censorship happening around the globe. Again, I'm encouraging you to join us on Parler, MeWe, Rumble, and on our email list. You can find all the direct links in the description of this video. May God bless you and keep you, and we are so thankful that you've chosen to follow and support LifeSite News. I'm John Henry Weston, co-founder and editor-in-chief of LifeSite News.